The hall was silent except for the faint echo of polished shoes against marble. Cameras clicked, journalists whispered, and the tension was thick enough to cut. In that crowded UN chamber, two men stood worlds apart, J.D. Vance, America's rising star of nationalism, and Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier president who had become Africa's symbol of defiance. Vance leaned forward, voice low and cold, his words meant to sting rather than resonate. "You'll fall," he whispered, his lips barely moving, "just like the others who tried to rise against the system. You'll be forgotten in a year, buried beneath the dust of your failed revolution." But Traoré didn't blink. His gaze was calm, his voice steady, the kind of calm that unnerved even the powerful. "Mr. Vance," he said, "we don't fall, we bury." The chamber went silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Then he added, his tone sharpening like the edge of a blade, "And what we bury are empires, yours included." A murmur rippled through the room. The African delegates exchanged glances, some smiled discreetly. Cameras zoomed in. In that single moment, Traoré wasn't just a man, he was a mirror reflecting centuries of arrogance back at its source. Vance forced a laugh, trying to shake the unease. "Big words for a small nation," he said. "Don't forget who built the world you live in." Traoré's smile widened, but it wasn't amusement, it was pity. "Built?" he said softly. "No, you looted it. And now, the builders are coming back for their stones." Gasps filled the hall. Vance's jaw tightened. Traoré's words cut through diplomatic politeness like a thunderclap. Cameras caught every flicker of emotion, the controlled fury in Vance's eyes, the quiet confidence in Traoré's. Outside, social media exploded within minutes. #WeBuryEmpires trended across Africa and beyond. In Ouagadougou, young people gathered in the streets, chanting his words as a new anthem of defiance. But behind that calm expression, Traoré knew this confrontation wasn't just symbolic. The whispers of sanctions, economic pressure, and covert destabilization had already begun. Empires don't fall quietly, and they never forgive the man who dares to predict their burial. And so, as the UN session adjourned, Traoré turned to his aide and said quietly, "Prepare for what comes next. They'll come not with armies, but with deals and knives." That night, the air in New York carried a tension that followed Traoré like a shadow. After his confrontation with J.D. Vance, the media swarmed every corner of the city. Headlines called him the African who dared to speak. But in Washington, the tone was darker. Traoré's name had just been added to the lists, not of heroes, but of men who challenged the global order. Inside a dimly lit suite overlooking the East River, Vance met with two senior officials from the Department of State. The mood was bitter. "You let him humiliate you," one of them said flatly. "His words are spreading across Africa like wildfire." Vance clenched his jaw. "Then let's put out the fire," he muttered. "Cut their funding. Block their trade routes. Make their banks nervous." The official nodded. "Already in motion. We'll make it look like market instability." What they didn't know was that Traoré had expected this. He had spent months preparing for the retaliation, cutting off French mining companies, redirecting exports to Asia, and creating gold reserves independent of Western banks. Burkina Faso wasn't rich in money, but it was rich in resolve. As he stood by the window of his hotel room that night, watching the city lights shimmer, Traoré said softly to his aide, "Marie, empires fall quietly, not when you attack them, but when you stop needing them." Marie hesitated. "Sir, you know what you said today will make enemies of powerful people." Traoré nodded. "Good. If they're my enemies, that means we're doing something right." Across the ocean, in Ouagadougou, the capital pulsed with energy. Massive crowds filled Revolution Square, waving flags and chanting, "We bury empires." It wasn't just pride, it was awakening. Meanwhile, intelligence reports arrived on Traoré's desk, Western agents moving in neighboring states, diplomatic cables hinting at economic interventions, and anonymous sources warning of a coordinated effort to neutralize his influence. He read every page calmly. "They still think we're afraid," he said, "but fear belongs to the ones who've ruled too long." That same night, an encrypted message reached his phone from an unknown source. they won't forgive what you said. Be ready. Traoré smiled faintly. I was born ready, he whispered. In the days that followed, the confrontation between Traoré and Vance spread across the world like lightning. Every major news network replayed the clip, Vance whispering, "You'll fall like the others," and Traoré responding, "We bury empires." That single line had become a weapon, more powerful than tanks or sanctions. In Ouagadougou, crowds flooded the streets, waving flags of Burkina Faso and chanting his name. Traoré, Traoré, Africa stands with you. Mothers carried their children on their shoulders, young men painted their faces with the national colors, and old veterans saluted from dusty sidewalks. The smell of roasted corn and gunpowder filled the air. It wasn't war yet, but the energy felt like it. From the balcony of the presidential palace, Traoré watched the people below. Marie stood beside him, holding a tablet showing international headlines. The man who defied the West. Traoré, the new face of African rebellion. Do you see this, Marie? He said quietly. They call it rebellion because they fear it might become freedom. Marie nodded. And Vance? Traoré smirked. He'll double down. That's what men who fear losing control do, they mistake pride for power. He was right. In Washington, Vance appeared on live television, his tone colder than ever. Leaders like Traoré are dangerous, he declared. They threaten order, trade, and the global balance we've built for decades. The United States won't stand idle while chaos spreads. But to millions watching in Africa, it wasn't chaos, it was courage. Across Ghana, Mali, Niger, and Chad, Traoré's words became a rallying cry. People painted "We bury empires" on walls, schools, and even military trucks. At night, in a private meeting with his advisors, General Ouedraogo leaned forward. Mr. President, intelligence suggests the West is planning to freeze our assets. Possibly even coordinate a coup through neighboring states. Traoré didn't flinch. Then let them come, he said. They've tried this before. They forget, Africa is no longer ruled by fear. He turned toward the window, the city glowing beneath him. The chants of thousands echoed into the night, defiant and unyielding. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso didn't feel small. It felt infinite, carried by a truth no empire could silence. Traoré whispered to himself, "They buried us once. They didn't know we were seeds." The backlash came faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of Vance's televised statement, Burkina Faso's gold shipments were halted at European ports. Bank transfers froze mid-transaction. Western media began pushing stories about human rights concerns and democratic instability. It was a familiar playbook, one that Africa had seen for decades. In a darkened meeting room inside the presidential palace, Traoré's ministers gathered in tense silence. Maps of trade routes glowed red on the wall, each line representing a lifeline now severed. "The sanctions are official," said Minister of Finance, Caboret. "They've blocked our exports, suspended international aid, and pressured regional banks to isolate us." Traoré leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "Good," he said calmly. "Now they can't take what we don't give." The room went silent for a moment. Marie broke it first. "Sir, if this continues, fuel and medicine shortages will begin within a week." Traoré stood and looked around the room. "Then we do what we always do, survive. But this time, we do it together." He walked to the window, gazing out at the restless capital. Empires starve nations because they fear hunger themselves. But a hungry people with purpose is stronger than a fed slave. Outside, despite the fear, the streets of Ouagadougou still pulsed with music and chants. "We bury empires" had turned from a slogan into a movement. Across Africa, farmers, students, and workers organized food-sharing campaigns. Local radio hosts played songs praising Traoré's defiance. Meanwhile, in Washington, Vance watched the reports on a muted screen. "He's turning this into a revolution," he said bitterly. "And the more we hit him, the stronger he gets." A CIA analyst replied quietly, "He's not just fighting back, sir. He's rewriting the story." Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré addressed his people live on national television. His uniform was simple, his tone steady, neither angry nor afraid. "They think they can silence us by closing their doors," he said. "But Africa has never needed permission to exist. We will plant our own fields, refine our own gold, and write our own future." His words echoed across the continent. In that moment, it wasn't just a political speech, it was a declaration of rebirth. Marie watched from behind the cameras. "Sir," she whispered, "you've started something they can't stop." Traoré nodded slowly. "That's the problem for them, Marie," he said. "Empires don't know how to fight ghosts, and Africa is the ghost they can't kill." By the end of the week, the sanctions had done their damage, but not the damage the West expected. Instead of breaking, Burkina Faso began to transform. Traoré summoned his ministers, generals, and village leaders to a national council unlike any before. They met under the open sky, surrounded by flags made not of silk, but of cotton stitched by local hands. "Gold is our blood," Traoré began, standing tall before the crowd. "For centuries, it has been stolen, melted, and stamped with foreign faces. No more. From today, our gold belongs to the soil, not to the empire." The crowd erupted. Farmers, soldiers, and miners alike raised their fists. The Gold Independence Act, as it came to be known, would nationalize every foreign mining operation. Overnight, billions in Western investments were declared void. In Washington, Vance slammed his desk. "He's nationalizing everything," he shouted. "He's daring us to respond." His aide hesitated. "Sir, if we retaliate militarily or economically again, it'll make him a martyr." Vance turned sharply. "He already is." Across Africa, Traoré's defiance ignited a spark. Mali, Niger, and Guinea soon joined him, announcing similar moves. The African Union called an emergency summit, and for the first time, the discussion wasn't about aid or debt, it was about ownership. Meanwhile, deep in the gold fields of Burkina Faso, miners hung portraits of Traoré beside their tools. "He speaks for us," one of them told a reporter. "He's doing what our fathers dreamed of, making gold serve the people." Back in Ouagadougou, Marie brought urgent intelligence to the president. "Sir, Western security advisors are meeting in Dakar. They're discussing how to stabilize your government." Traoré smiled faintly. "Stabilize," he repeated. Their favorite word for replacing what they can't control. He turned to his generals. "If they come, we don't fight them with fear. We fight them with unity. 1,000 soldiers can be crushed, but 1,000,000 citizens can't." That night, he addressed the nation once more. His voice carried through radios and phones, across deserts and cities. "Let them whisper of our fall," he said, his tone calm and heavy. "Because while they whisper, Africa is waking." The crowd outside the palace roared. Flames of torches lit the night sky. Banners of gold and red waved above them. Traoré looked out over the crowd, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "They say we'll fall like the others," he said softly. "Then let's fall forward, and bury them beneath the weight of their own greed." The next morning, the air in Ouagadougou was tense, thick with both pride and danger. Western diplomats had evacuated their embassies overnight. Satellite images showed unfamiliar aircraft circling off the West African coast. Rumors spread that Operation Sandveil, a covert mission to remove Traoré, had begun. Marie rushed into the presidential chamber. "Sir, the Americans have cut communications to our central bank. They're pushing ECOWAS to send troops under the label of a peacekeeping force." Traoré looked up from a map. "Peacekeeping," he muttered, almost laughing. "They always arrive with guns, not olive branches." General Ouedraogo entered, his face grave. "We've mobilized the defense units. The people are ready to fight if it comes to that." Traoré nodded slowly. "No," he said. "We won't give them a war. We'll give them a mirror." That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Traoré appeared live on national television. His image was broadcast not only across Africa, but, thanks to hackers sympathetic to his cause, across Europe and America as well. "To those who call themselves liberators," he began, "I ask, Why do your bombs always land where our children sleep? Why do your sanctions always starve those who never held a gun? He paused, his eyes steady. You threaten to come for our gold, for our soil, for our freedom. But remember this, what grows from African earth cannot be uprooted by foreign hands. The transmission went viral instantly. Millions shared the clip, adding the same caption, "The lion has spoken." In Washington, J.D. Vance watched in silence, his knuckles white. He's turning the world against us, he whispered. In Ouagadougou, the people poured into the streets again, not in fear this time, but in faith. They weren't waiting for rescue. They were ready to protect their home. Above them, Traoré stood on the balcony, the wind pulling at his coat, his expression unshaken. Let them come, he murmured. Africa won't kneel again. The following night, the skies above Burkina Faso glowed faintly, not from stars, but from distant aircraft. Drones buzzed along the border. Intelligence intercepts confirmed it, foreign operatives were moving weapons through neighboring territories. The empire was tightening its grip. In the palace war room, Traoré stood before a digital map dotted with red lights. They want us cornered, he said. But a cornered lion bites harder than a marching army. Marie handed him a sealed report. Sir, they're spreading disinformation. Western outlets are calling you a dictator, accusing you of silencing the press. Traoré smiled bitterly. When they control the story, truth becomes rebellion. He turned to his communications minister. Then we'll tell our own. Within hours, a massive campaign launched across Africa, #AfricaSpeaks. Thousands of young creators, journalists, and activists flooded the internet with stories of exploitation, resistance, and pride. They posted about stolen gold, secret military bases, and how their grandparents had lived through civilization that came with guns. The movement spread like wildfire. In South Africa, university students projected Traoré's speech on campus walls. In Ghana, fishermen painted his quote, "Africa won't kneel again," on their boats. Even in Paris, African diaspora groups marched before the French parliament, chanting, "We bury empires." Meanwhile, in Washington, Vance grew desperate. He's uniting them, he snapped at his advisors. Cut his broadcasts. Flood the web with counterpropaganda. But it was too late. The narrative had escaped their grasp. In Ouagadougou, Traoré addressed his advisors once more. They'll call us rebels, radicals, savages, anything to deny that we're awake. But let them scream, he said, his voice steady as thunder. Empires don't fall when we fight them. They fall when we stop believing their lies. Marie looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. And if they attack, sir? Traoré looked toward the dark horizon. Then let history record who fired first. The room went silent. Outside, a storm gathered, not of rain, but of destiny. By morning, the message from Washington arrived, an ultimatum wrapped in the language of diplomacy. A U.S. envoy, pale and nervous, read it aloud in the presidential chamber. Cease nationalization of gold reserves, reopen trade to Western partners, and reinstate suspended agreements. Failure to comply will result in international intervention. When he finished, silence hung heavy. Traoré didn't even look at the letter, he looked at the envoy. Intervention? He asked softly. That's what you call invasion when it's done in a suit. Marie watched the envoy shift uncomfortably. Mr. President, the man stammered, if you defy this order, it won't just be sanctions this time. Traoré rose from his chair, every movement deliberate, controlled. Tell your superiors something for me, he said. Africa is not your experiment. You've intervened in our schools, our borders, our dreams. If you want our gold, bring your soldiers. But remember, every soldier that lands here will dig his own grave in the sand. The envoy swallowed hard. Is that a threat? Traoré's lips curved slightly. No, he said. It's a forecast. That night, the Burkinabe streets glowed with torchlight. Men and women marched with handmade signs reading "Hands off Africa" and "Our gold, our future." From the rooftops, children waved flags of red, green, and gold. Meanwhile, in Western capitals, the panic grew. European banks reported millions of Africans withdrawing savings and converting them into local currencies. Trade analysts called it the Traoré effect. In an emergency meeting at the Pentagon, Vance slammed a classified report onto the table. "He's not just defying us, he's changing the balance of the world." A general leaned back, uneasy. "Then what do we do?" Vance's eyes narrowed. "We remind him who controls the sky." Back in Ouagadougou, radar stations lit up. Unknown aircraft entered Burkinabe airspace. The generals rushed to the palace. "Sir, we have visual confirmation, multiple drones heading north to south." Traoré stood on the balcony as the first roar echoed overhead. The crowd below looked up, shouting his name. "Let them come," he whispered. "The sun rises here." The first drone strike hit the outskirts of Ouagadougou just before dawn. A deafening boom shattered windows miles away. The ground shook, and the night sky turned orange. Sirens wailed through the capital as soldiers scrambled into position. Inside the palace, dust rained from the ceiling. Marie burst into the war room, clutching her earpiece. "Sir, they're targeting communication towers, trying to blind us." General Ouedraogo shouted over the chaos. "We're responding with anti-air units, but they're moving fast. These are American drones." Traoré didn't flinch. He moved toward the command table, eyes steady. "They've declared war without saying the word," he muttered. "Then let the world see what they call peace." He grabbed a microphone and gave the order to his media team, "Go live. Show everything, the bombs, the smoke, the people who refuse to run." Within minutes, live feeds from the ground flooded the internet. Viewers across Africa and Europe watched as ordinary Burkinabe citizens formed human chains, pulling the wounded from rubble, singing the national anthem beneath falling debris. On one viral clip, a young boy, covered in dust, raised a tattered flag and shouted, "We don't kneel." The image broke the internet. #We don't kneel trended worldwide. Protesters flooded streets in Dakar, Accra, Lagos, and even London. "Stop the war," they shouted. "Let Africa live." At the palace, smoke seeped through cracked walls. Marie approached Traoré, eyes wet but defiant. "Sir, they're breaking everything we've built." Traoré turned to her. "No," he said quietly. "They're proving everything we've said." He stepped outside, surrounded by chaos, the night still burning red. Cameras caught him walking through the crowd, calm, unarmed, dust covering his uniform. Soldiers saluted. Civilians cheered. Traoré raised his fist toward the sky. "You can bomb our cities," he shouted, "but you cannot bomb our spirit." The people roared back, their voices drowning out the drones. And for the first time, even the Empire's machines seemed to hesitate. When the final explosions faded, the city fell into an eerie silence. Smoke drifted over Ouagadougou like a shroud, but beneath it, the people were still standing, battered, angry, unbroken. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, lighting the ruins in gold. Traoré stood on the balcony of the half-damaged palace, surrounded by soldiers and citizens. His voice carried through loudspeakers to the crowd gathered below. "They thought fire could silence us," he began, his tone calm but fierce. "But every flame they lit only forged us stronger." Marie handed him a satellite report. "The attacks have stopped, sir. The world saw everything. Even their own allies are condemning it." Traoré nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then history will remember who bombed children and who rebuilt hope." He descended the steps into the crowd. People reached for him, hands scarred, trembling, but full of faith. He raised the Burkinabe flag high, its edges scorched but still flying. Cameras flashed. Across social media, his image spread like wildfire, captioned simply, "Africa still stands." Meanwhile, in Washington, Vance watched the footage in silence. His advisor whispered, "Sir, it backfired. He's become a symbol." Vance's jaw tightened. "No," he muttered. "He's become a mirror." Back in Africa, leaders from across the continent called for an emergency summit, not to condemn, but to unite. Nations that had once remained silent now spoke with one voice. Gold, oil, and agriculture deals once signed with the West were suspended. A new alliance formed overnight, the African Sovereignty Pact. On live broadcast, Traoré stood before the flags of 12 nations. "They called us rebels," he said, "but rebels built nations. They called us threats, but threats create change. And they called us savages, yet we're the ones saving humanity from its greed." He paused, his eyes unwavering. "Let them call us whatever they wish," he finished. "Because from today, Africa bows to no one." The crowd erupted. Bells rang across capitals. Children danced in the streets. And somewhere in the ashes of Ouagadougou, a new chapter of African destiny began, written not with fear, but with fire.